What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.
Hello, AVAIYA family. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Krista Resnick, is with us today to talk about becoming boundaried, the art of knowing, loving, and expressing yourself. Krista is a master coach, boundary expert, podcaster, and mother to 3 adultish boys. She helps overwhelmed women embody boundaries from the inside out so they can stand in their power, own their gifts, and increase their impact. She strongly believes that a well-boundaried life empowers women to stop people-pleasing and come back home to themselves so they can create lives that are purposeful and passion-fueled. Welcome to AVAIYA, Krista.
I am so honored to be here, Andy. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, so great to have you. And I love your topic. I love that it's becoming boundaried.
Yeah, it's really a process. It's not just what did they call that back in the day, like the 80s one-hit wonder? I think those artists that did the one-hit wonders. Mm-hmm. It's really this beautiful, not unlayering. I make up my own language. I just have to put that out there right from the get-go. This uncovering, this when we dig and explore and go back to a lot of the childhood conditioning, which I'm sure we'll talk about that here, it's really about this lack of self-love, right? And so it's this process of learning how to love yourself, learning how to stand for what matters to you, stand for what you need, stand for what you value, and then being able to express that out into the world.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, I love your language, your full permission to make up your own language here at AVAIYA. I love it.
Sometimes my husband's like, that's not a word. I'm like, but it is now.
It is now. It's a Krista word. So let's talk, what are boundaries? Let's just start there.
This is actually, believe it or not, my favorite question. And I want to preface this by saying, I've actually watched many of your AVAIYA videos before. And what I love about what you guys do is there's so many experts sharing their knowledge, sharing their wisdom, sharing their own journey and what worked for them. One of the things that I don't necessarily stand for in the industry is folks who say, this is the one right way. This is how we heal. This is how it's done. There can be a lot of different modalities and resources that we use to heal and to support ourselves. I share that because I also actually believe the same about boundaries. I think there can be a lot of definitions that we can play with. There can be a lot of things that work for us for a while that maybe then we need to lay to rest. So before I get to my definition and what I love to play with, when I first started doing this work, I had to get very rigid with my boundaries. I was massively codependent. I had a very, very strong people-pleasing part of me. And so right from the get-go, I had to just start saying no. And I had to make it as simple as that, because if I started down that rabbit hole of over-explaining and rationalizing and justifying, I was a goner, right? So for a while, it just had to be no. Eventually, that led me to kind of waking up one morning going, I'm kind of boundaried, but I'm also kind of lonely. I'm kind of disconnected. So I had swung the pendulum so far to the other extreme that then I had to do some work around that and kind of go, what's going on there, right? So all that to be said, there's lots of definitions we can play with. There's lots of different, opportunities here and interpretations. The definition that I really love to play with, or definitions, is boundaries are like sort of this line, right? And when we get moving towards that line, something happens in our external environment and we meet that line. We have an opportunity when we get, when we push against that line to choose. Are we going to go into our old ways of being and our pattern? Or are we going to stand for what we value, what we want, and what we need? Boundaries are really about being honest with who we are, where we stand in life on certain things, what matters to us, what our needs are. They're about being honest with what's the capacity that we have at this season of our life. They're felt in the body, right? So a lot of times I'll have a client that will come to me, we'll start working together, and they want to have every single boundary laid out for every single situation and circumstance. And I always have to question that a little bit and get curious about what that means, because I just don't know that that's possible. When we kind of relax and just come back home into the body, our body somatically will tell us where our boundary lines actually already are. That's a long answer to your question.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
No. And I love that you preface too, that there's different answers, different definitions, different opinions, and different modalities for people. Obviously, when it comes to healing codependency and setting boundaries. And what's your take on when we need to set them? Like, how do we know when we need to set a boundary?
I like to play with 4 heavy hitters. These are the ones that I see most commonly. Not only I saw them in myself and they still arise, but I also see them in many of the clients that I work with. And that is, of course, overwhelm, right? When we're just holding all of the things, as many of us folks do with codependent patterning, we want to be the totally people, right? Like, I don't know if you ever read the Sweet Valley High books. Did you read those as a teenager?
I think I read at least one of them. I definitely know that name though, very well.
Okay. Well, I was obsessed with them back in I think it was 80s. Mm-hmm. And the premise of the book was based in somewhere in California. And so they used that California language back then of I'll totally do this. Oh, I'll totally do this. And so I use that to kind of be a little playful. I've got a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek personality. A lot of us are the totally girls or the totally guys, right? Oh, I totally will, come over and help you move on Saturday. I'll totally sign up for the 15th year in a row to be president of the PTA. I'll totally work on the weekends. I'll totally answer emails at midnight. And so we're holding all of these like spinning plates. And of course, we're going to feel overwhelmed because there's not an ounce of space for us to just be and invite in playfulness and pleasure and peace, right? Mm-hmm. So overwhelm is one of the things, the heavy hitters that we want to watch out for. Another one, of course, that goes tightly, it's intertwined with overwhelm is exhaustion. So I've had fried adrenals twice, for the very reason that I just explained. I was the totally girl saying yes to everybody else. I was so others focused. Who do you need me to be? Totally got it. Oh, you need me to be this? Totally got it. I got all of you, right? I was a people-pleasing contortionist. So I was exhausted. I actually, Andy, would wake up in the morning, and the first thing I would think when my eyes popped open were, can I get a nap today? What do I have going on today? Do I get a nap? I was that fatigued and just drained. So that's number 2. We also want to watch out. Number 3 and number 4 are anger and resentment. Mm. I like to call resentment, and of course, those are so enmeshed with each other as well, but I like to call resentment actually stale anger. So it's that anger in the moment that we deem as unacceptable, and we smush it down, right? And we just don't want anybody to know, because think about some of the messaging that we receive, especially as women, around being angry. Mm-hmm. And so we smush it down, and that literally takes up, residence in our systems. And so we muddle up our relationships and we muddle up our lives with this toxic energy called resentment. So those are the 4 things that I like to talk about. There's more than that, of course, but those are the 4 heavy hitters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And when you said resentment, I was like, ding, that is such a great thing for people, because I think it's often overlooked too, but it makes perfect sense, right? That you would, once you realize you're resenting somebody, okay, well, where have I not set a boundary, right? Yes, absolutely key.
Yeah. And one of the ways that I really noticed my resentment, maybe this could be a 5th way that I've been talking about more and more, and I see it come up all the time in my clients. And of course, it came up constantly with my own personal life, was avoidance. So when I would, open up my phone and I saw that, maybe Beth texted me, it was kind of like, oh, right? Oh, what does she want? Ding, ding, ding. That's a sign that there was something probably going on that I needed to set a boundary and I wasn't willing to, or I didn't have the capacity to.
Yeah. Good.
So anytime we start to want to avoid people, it's probably a sign that a boundary needed to be put in place.
Yeah, good way of putting that. Yes, I'm sure everyone can relate to getting that text or getting whatever, that email or what have you. So why do you think boundary setting is so difficult? It tends to be a hard thing to learn to do for a lot of us.
Yeah. And again, lots of reasons. A couple of the ones that I'll mention were created for community, right? Like, go back to the caveman days. And I know you've unpacked this a lot on the show. We are created to do life together. So when you're setting that boundary, when your knees are knocking, when your armpits are getting sweaty, more than likely it's the fear of rejection. It's the fear of, okay, if I set this boundary and Andy doesn't like it and she's really mad at me, what happens then? Is she going to reject me? Am I going to be kicked out of the club? Right? And that can be a tough thing. So that would be number one. Number two, something that I'm so passionate about is helping people really understand conflict. So many of us, if not most of us, just haven't been taught that conflict really can be a beautiful thing to help us understand the internal feedback that we're getting, right? What's happening in our bodies when we're having some sort of outer conflict. There's also an internal conflict happening as well. But we've been taught that conflict feels bad, therefore it must be bad. And so when we get those bad feelings, and I don't believe in bad feelings, but the ways of the world, we label them as positive, negative, good, bad feelings. So when we get those big, bad, scary feelings, it's like, I don't know what to do with this. Let's just acquiesce. Let's just placate. Let's just, be who that person wants us to be so that we don't feel this way, because this way feels really, really bad. So we have to start really understanding the feedback of the body. We have to start really reframing that conflict is actually feedback and it's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. That's so important because yes, I too have the struggle of not wanting to get into conflict with anyone. Absolutely. Very uncomfortable. And yeah, just how much that comes up, especially with boundary setting. And I'm curious. So if people are watching and they recognize it's hard for them to set a boundary, it's difficult for them to feel the feelings that come up during conflict. How do they cultivate confidence to feel that fear and discomfort and, set the boundary anyway?
It's so interesting that you asked that question.